Good morning. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. I have the honor of facilitating a short conversation with these wonderful leaders who have been serving as your co-presidents for the Unitarian Universalist Association. As an association, we benefited from the thoughtfulness and wisdom of our board of trustees when they called these three leaders. They stepped in and provided leadership after the resignation of Reverend Peter Morales, and we are so blessed that these three leaders accepted the call. I'm going to give you a little more background about our presidents. It'll be very brief, but just so you know that Reverend Sophia Betancourt serves as the assistant professor of the Unitarian Universalist Theologies and Ethics at the Star King School for the Ministry.
They're all back there.
She also served as director of racial and ethnic concerns for the Unitarian Universalist Association, and her ministry centers on the work that is empowering and counter-oppressive. Dr. Leon Spencer is a longtime lay leader in our movement and the recipient of the 2009 Unitarian Universalist Distinguished Service Award. He has served the association at the congregational, regional, and associational level. Dr. Spencer is Professor Emeritus in Leadership Technology and Human Development at Georgia Southern University. And then there is Reverend Bill Sinkford. Do I need to say anything?
Probably not.
Oops, sorry. Bill is on loan from the First Unitarian Church of Portland, Oregon, where he serves as senior minister. And Reverend Sinkford, for those of you who may not be aware, served as our president of this association for the first time from 2001 to 2009. Our co-presidents wish to share a little of their experience that they've had over the last 11 weeks. Candidly, they said it felt more like 11 years. They also would like to share some of their hopes and challenges for our faith, and the intent is to have an informal conversation here. You will hear a more formal report tomorrow morning. Sophia and Leon and Bill ask that you hold your applause until the conversation is completed. We know this is a big ask, considering that you are UUs and very expressive. However, during the conversation, if you can limit your appreciation perhaps to hand waving and maybe a few shout outs, that's okay. Well, we don't want to break up the flow too much. It would greatly honor our co-presidents and also honor the limited time that we have. So, shall we jump in? First question. What made you say yes, and why did you agree to these roles? Whoever would like to start, please.
Go.
I've asked myself that question. And my reason for saying yes is because I saw it as another opportunity to come home. And that was specifically related to a gathering of Blue here in New Orleans on the Mississippi River. And at that gathering, I saw a room full of black people, actually. And I said, who are these people? And they were me. And they were from our pews. And I thought with that, I cannot say no. It was an opening of a door to come home. That's why I said yes.
Pretty good. No, that was good.
That was
Good.
really good.
Good job, good job.
Nice.
You know, I think I should maybe be candid. I'm looking at a friend of mine who's out in the crowd and serving beautifully on our board of trustees that I actually said a preemptive no, or I tried to. You know, just kind of weighing in on what I thought the board might do in this particular moment. I had conversations about whether there should be people of color picking up this moment at all. Might we be better served with a white interim president? Might we take on the work differently if that were the case? But I woke up to a very early morning email from our beloved moderator, Jim Key, just asking for a phone conversation, but I knew. And I called Jim and I asked him, after he explained why he was calling me, I asked him what the job was. Can you imagine? How would you answer that question, what this job was? And he tried for about 15 minutes. He tried, and then he said, Sophia, I'm calling to ask you to hold the faith for 10 weeks. And I need to know if there is a part of your calling as a religious leader that feels the need to answer yes to that question. What do you say? Yeah? You hold the faith. And part of the conversation I had with some of our religious leaders this week was to say, I don't think that's just my question. We need you to hold the faith. It doesn't exist without all of us. And it's not a 10-week question. Right, so will you continue to hold the faith in Jim's honor and memory?
Yeah.
What is there but yes?
Thank you.
So I had a conversation with Jim Key too, and I had some reservations. You know, I've done this gig before, and so I wanted to hear from him what he wanted me and us to do. An 11-week interim? I mean, really. And he struggled for a bit, just as I think he did with you, Sophia. He struggled for a bit, and what he finally said was Bill, we need you, and that's a pretty powerful thing to hear. And then he said, we need you to help set the table for the future of this faith. We need you to help set the table for the future of this faith. And I said, that's powerful language, Jim. What does that mean to you? And he said, you know, in part, it's an acknowledgement that the table that we have set, that we thought was perfect in every respect, or at least nearly so, has some big flaws that need mending. And we need to find a different way to set some open chairs at that table.
Yeah.
We need to find some ways to bring the real experience of people of color toward the center of the table rather than making them sit at the kiddie table. Now, he didn't say that. I'm making that up. But that was what convinced me to say yes. The opportunity, the need, the challenge to set the table for the future of this faith.
In some of your updates and in the messages you've been giving us, you've been talking about this time as a moment of opportunity. What is that opportunity? And is it all about black people?
So I don't know who wants to go first on this one. It was critical to me, and I think it should be critical to you, to understand this time in the life of Unitarian Universalism, not just as a time where there are these series of problems that we need to deal with, but as a time of opportunity where we can chart a different, a more inclusive, a more grounded course forward. So we use the language of opportunity a lot. But there are problems that need dealing with too, and part of the way I understand the opportunity is to shift our focus away from the persons Because when you're dealing with individual persons, it's easy to begin demonizing and critiquing and having all kinds of opinions about how she or he or they may have done their work, to shift attention away from the persons to the patterns, from the persons to the patterns, so that we can begin inspecting how it is that we embody this fabulous faith and make some changes so that we can live into a hopeful future.
I think that the opportunity that I see is that we have such a history of pain and we have such a history of success. And I think that perhaps we've lived in our pain, and I'm certainly not saying we should ignore it. I think we can grow from that. And I think that we run from success. I hear frequently about we have another opportunity, or we have a second chance, is what I hear. No, folks, it's the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th chance. The opportunity would be to do it different by looking at who owns the table that we're inviting people to. We know how. How do we come together? This is the opportunity in our differences, in our pain and in our healing. Is it for mostly black people? I think that this is an opportunity to look at if we talk about dismantling a white supremacist culture, white people wouldn't need to ask that question, because it's about them also, it's about all people. What's the picture of the benefit of dismantling a white supremacist culture? That isn't just about my black brothers and sisters and brothers and sisters of color. That's about you white folks also. That's an opportunity if you think about what would it look like to be able to let that go. Knowing that there are benefits in not letting it go for you.
I think we're in a moment of incredible opportunity, and it comes from the coming together of so many groups of Unitarian Universalists responding in a different way. I saw 3 beloved religious educator colleagues in a moment when religious educators were being talked about in the public square in a way that I would like to have never happen again. And instead of responding with simple rage, they provided us with tools for faith development, which is what religious educators do. And more than 700 congregations participated in a white supremacy teach-in. That kind of grassroots response and profound leadership. I'm looking at Cristina Rivera, I'm thinking of Aisha Hauser and Kenny Wiley and Lou and everyone who supported them. That kind of response feeds a moment of opportunity. I'm thinking of a board of trustees that responded to a crisis with this kind of creativity, right, and resilience. I'm thinking of a UUA staff that we came into 24 and found loss and heartache, but steadfastness, determination, faithfulness, right? We're seeing investment, resourcing, conversations, leaning into a new way. I also think it's important to remember as we respond, the question about, is this just about black folks? I think we all know where that question comes from. It comes from a worry, a fear, what I'm going to actually name a culture of scarcity, in addition to all the racial injustice issues that we're talking about, this fear that there's only so much energy to invest in the work of justice, and what if not all of us will be whole? at the supposed end of this work, whatever that means. I think instead we become more whole, right, as we lean into the full humanity of all people while remembering that anti-Black racism, oppression against our indigenous family in particular, right, that this is the foundation of what we're talking about when we talk about white supremacy, but that extends and spreads to a culture of domination that impacts everyone, right? So the many ways that we are made small so that some small group of people can advance above everybody else. That is what I understand as white supremacy. So is it all about Black people? No. Will it ever be addressed if we don't dig into the foundations of anti-Black racism and intentional attempts at genocide for our native kin? Never. We have an intersectional approach, and it centers on race. And this is how we become more whole.
All right, you have been talking about the future. You've described it. Several of you have talked about it, setting the table for the future. What is the work of setting that table? And what are the questions that you would like this GA to wrestle with as it goes forward?
I love singing Coming to the Welcome Table, and I bet many of you do. Black, white, gays, whatever, we're all going to come to the welcome table. My thought goes to who owns the table that we're coming to, and I want to know, where am I going to sit at the table? Because that's important. Some people get more than others depending on where they're sitting at the table. So I want to come to the welcome table, but I think we need to build a welcome table, and this time to build it on a structure that is not a structure, I'm going to repeat it over and over, folks, of white supremacy culture, where all of us can be welcome. We don't have to walk to the table, we can roll to the table, however somebody else can bring us to the table. But that's the piece I get about the welcome table. We have to do more than sing it. We have to restructure it. And I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. I think we know how to do it. We really do. We know how to do it. So how do we risk restructuring the table? And what do you bring to the table? It's like a big potluck, really. Who's preparing it? Who's cleaning up? I'm sorry, I deal in images. Okay. Do I have to clean the table up?
There you go.
I don't want to clean the table. Okay, not anymore. Okay. And I'm going to go into Spencer Ramble, so I'm going to... I think I've answered the question. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Okay.
I think I'd like to invite folks to spend some time thinking about what the heart of Unitarian Universalism really is. Not what it looks like, not the old familiar comforting expression of it, but what is Unitarian Universalism to you? What are the central values, not necessarily the messages of how they're expressed? Where's the faithfulness for you? Where's spiritual practice for you? Where is interwoven community and relationality for you? What are the things that can never be set down? What's inherent to us? I think we focus a lot on the words we use, what the music sounds like, the expressions of ourselves. And while we have amazing people leading us in new ways, actually in all of those areas, Too often we get hung up in the structures without realizing the ways that they impact other people, as if the structures are the heart of our faith. They're not. There are thousands of us in New Orleans. What is Unitarian Universalism at its core? And how might that richness that calls so many of us in community be carried forward in ways that are actually universalist, that actually make us more whole, that feed our full humanity, and might actually impact the world in new ways? If the house was on fire, some might say that it is. I think it's on fire with opportunity. But if the house was on fire, what's the one thing you'd carry with you? Uh-oh, maybe that's my time. Find the heart of Unitarian Universalism. Find a way to share it with more than you know.
I want to affirm what my co-president colleagues have said, and then offer two more thoughts. One of them builds on what you were talking about, Leon. I hope that this gathering can listen and take in the truth that Unitarian Universalism, as it has been lived out, has been a struggle for some of us to commit to. Not because of the problems of our theology, not because of the promise that's offered by the Unitarian and the Universalist heritage. It's not about the promise of our theology. It's about the practice of our faith. And because it's about the practice of our faith, we actually have a chance to change it. We can remember the center of our faith. Remember that there is nothing in universalism which insists on sameness. And some of the high points of the history that I have lived through in this faith have dealt with honoring individual identities. This was the marriage equality movement that energized our faith for a couple of decades. We have the theological strength if we can remember that how we practice that faith makes a huge difference in terms of who can take part.
Thank you. All right, what do you hope that people will take home from GA? And what will they take back to the pews and to the pulpit after this as we move forward with this grand adventure?
I'll do some of the easy stuff.
Yeah.
We've been focusing a great deal of our attention on the UUA, on the staff and providing pastoral support and the key close-in leadership structures, and that's good work, and changes need to be made there. But that's the easy part of the task. The real task is what we all do in our congregational settings. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you need to start asking some different questions in your congregations, questions about who you hire and how you welcome and who you buy from and all of those. You know these questions. This is not beyond your scope, right? But also to move in our congregational systems and in our voluntary organizations to a place where it is always okay to ask how race and culture impact this conversation.
Yeah.
Where that's the way we do things around here. That's where we need to move, back home.
I think carrying back to the pews, some of this has happened with our teachings.
Yes. Yes.
And so the pews are ready. It's our leadership in carrying it back to the pews, not in this hall. What we had, 800 congregations or so to really respond. Gosh, you've never seen people so ready with things that some people thought we shouldn't do this. It would rock the boat. Taking it back, naming it, claiming it, what the it is, who we are, who we aspire to be as a faith community. Name it and claim it. But I think something that's really critical that we take back is that it's an inside job. It's not the job of us as Unitarian Universalists just doing the outside work. That this is the opportunity to do the inside job.
Amen.
Right in our little fellowships, congregations, there's lots of inside work to be done. And it is rich when you do the inside work.
I think I want to build on that and say that the inside job is really important. And I also want you all to know that we are hearing, right, from our family of liberal religious traditions that folks are watching. They're paying attention to what we're doing right now. I think there's some worry with all the very real pain and struggle in the world that we're somehow pausing, right, to reflect on ourselves. But actually, we are hearing from leaders, and I mean leaders of all kinds of other faith traditions, to say, you are taking on white supremacy head on. We're waiting to see what you come up with, right? We're looking for leadership. And I think we've understood ourselves to be on this edge of doing the work of racial justice, and it's time to be on that forward-moving edge again, and to not believe that this is just about our one congregation or our one staff group or our one classroom. This is actually an invitation to our broader communities to do this long-needed work of justice and redemption in this nation that has to be driven by our values and can thereby be supported by our faith. I hope you will also take invitation home with you. You're going to hear more about a commission on institutional change as we move forward. These good folks are committing to be with us for 2 years, to help guide vision, to guide new resourcing, to guide conversations. They can't do that without you. So I hope when you hear from us and from them that there are more and more invitations to how we do this work, to remember that it allows us to do the work together. I think sometimes it's incredibly stressful. My one congregation has this percentage of this type of, it's not about that. We are a community of faith. We're going to do this together. So when you get an invitation, say yes, show up, participate, be faithful. We believe in you.
Thank you for answering those questions. Would you like to share some closing comments?
Yesterday, I had an opportunity to go in for just a minute, half minute, it seemed, to say hello to a group of religious educators. And I had a new piece to come to mind for me that connected with this. I wanted to know what was I running from when I decided to be a Unitarian. At that time, it was a Unitarian Universalist, and then a Unitarian Universalist. And what I'd hope I was running to. I served as a religious educator, only male, in the basement of a church I won't name. I stayed there for 2 years because there I could learn about Unitarian Universalism in a very uncontaminated way. The minister invited me upstairs. He said, come up and be with the big people. The big people were downstairs. I hope that my little people at that time will grow to be Unitarian Universalists, that they are, but they don't come to pews often. And what this has to do is that I realize that religious education is truly a lifespan piece. When you take and you connect this to the work that we are doing today, so we have a huge piece of educating both adults and children. And people see that from the outside too, and that's an invitation. I'm glad I'm upstairs. But let's not forget those chords. It never struck me until yesterday when I was speaking to Loretta for a few minutes. That's justice work. That's anti-oppression work. That's, oh, what a gold mine.
I am very mindful that as we engage this work that looks inward, there's a world out there where black people and people of color are getting killed every day.
Yeah.
And it's a real tension for me as to whether to invest all of my energy here or out there on, and I know it's a tension for many of you. And the place that I've had to find in my own spirit is to understand that the work, that it's one piece of work, that it's not out there and in here. It's the piece of work. It's what we're called to do. It's what the Spirit is asking us to respond to. And so I've found that space. I hope that you can as well, because for me, given my commitments to this faith, it could not be more important to me for this faith to redeem its history. Because a lot of it's history that I have lived through. And I had to leave at one point. And I don't want to have to leave again. And I don't want the people of color, the indigenous folks, the queer folks, I don't want anybody to have to leave because we refuse to do the work. And so that's my commitment.
I think I also want to touch on history. We do keep talking about a moment of opportunity. I just want to acknowledge that there are so many among us and so many more no longer among us who gave so much of themselves for decades to get us to a point where we even could respond to this moment as a moment of opportunity. Think about not just the history that needs redeeming, but the history of leadership, of sacrifice, of investment. We all have mentors who have invested in this work for racial justice, for wholeness, for completeness in our faith tradition. And I want to remind you that we are those people of this moment. I particularly want to lift my colleagues, all the religious professionals who identify as people of color, as indigenous folk, lay leaders who identify as people of color and/or indigenous. We are not the only ones who need to be invested in this work.
Amen.
Amen.
Right? The work of leaning into solidarity is real, and the work of leadership is real. I want to remind you that even though you have 3 people of color who said yes to this moment, and a moderator of color who said yes to this moment, we are a predominantly white denomination. If white leadership does not participate in this work, we will continue to burn out our leaders of color and lose them. I am here because of mentors who stayed long enough to mentor me. Some came back, some will never come back. Let us leave pathways to the future that are whole, invitational, robust, risk-taking, faithful, and present. And may we remember those who gave that we might come to this day.
Thank you for your wisdom, your thoughtfulness, and your time and your hearts over these last 11 weeks. Would you please join me in thanking them for their time?